Thank you for being with us today, Dr. Wiley. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do with Marshall and with Lumen?
Sure. So I'm originally from Barbersville. Attended Marshall back in the 90s, class of 97. Have a BFA in vocal performance. So I was a music major. And then went to grad school to do educational technology, as you do after an undergraduate degree in music. So frequently. And then spent about a dozen years, some time as a postdoc and then as a tenure track and then tenured faculty. And then started Lumen, which is an educational technology company with a friend of mine based on some work that was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And Lumen is a provider of digital courseware, so course materials that you would use in a college class, but it's fully online, interactive, automatically graded homework, things like that, with a focus on accessibility and affordability. So it's $35 as opposed to $150 or $175 that you might pay for something similar. But we have a real focus on making sure every student has access to the materials that they need, as well as making sure that when they do access those materials that they're going to have a positive, effective experience with the materials that they end up accessing.
Yeah. There's a real focus on the student's humanity, right? There's a big focus on equity and inclusion.
Equity, agency, yeah. The most recent work that we've done, funded by the Gates Foundation, the foundation's a long time funder of our work, but most recently just finished the first phase of a project looking at introductory statistics. And the single criterion we're being evaluated against in that graph is the degree to which we've eliminated race and income as predictors of success for students in that class. So we really are focused on creating equitable outcomes for everyone.
Great. Yeah, I ask you about that because a lot of the focus of our conversation today will be on AI. But I want to make sure that we're kicking it off thinking about a lot of the humanity that you deal with in what you do. Okay, and then the first thing that I want to talk to you about is, I guess it kind of involves some of that anxiety that we have surrounding AI. So let's talk about barriers. So according to WGU Labs, out of 2024, this is a recent survey, 42% of faculty believe AI tools, or I should say only 42% of faculty believe AI tools will positively impact them. What do you think the main barriers are to AI adoption in the classroom?
It's just familiarity, 100% familiarity. The surveys from last year and from this year have shown if you break both faculty and administrators into groups by, they say they've used AI themselves before or they haven't used AI themselves, people who have used it feel significantly more comfortable, more positive, or more optimistic about it, and the folks who haven't are not. So I think we fear what we don't understand, and so I think that initial kind of familiarity is really the biggest obstacle.
Yeah, okay. Well, the next question is kind of related. It has to do with tech fatigue. WGU Labs also had a survey that revealed 41% of faculty report burnout and tech fatigue. What are some strategies that could be implemented to mitigate tech fatigue and burnout, especially related to AI?
Well, I think everybody was so burned out during COVID. Prior to COVID, everybody was using technology to the degree that they were comfortable with it, that they wanted to use it, they were using it the way they wanted to use it. And then, coming back to agency that we were just talking about a second ago, during COVID, everybody was stripped of their agency. You had to be online, you had to use the LMS, you had to do this, you had to do that. You really didn't have any choice. And I think that just created a ton of burnout for people that had avoided some of that for whatever their reasons were. They had chosen not to teach that way, or maybe not to learn that way. Not all students are super excited about fully online asynchronous courses either. And so I think coming right off of that sense of loss of agency, of being forced to use technology, and there's not a pandemic that's forcing everyone to use AI, but it feels like it's everywhere. It kind of feels like you don't have a choice. Like you need to figure out how to use it because the train is coming and you can get on or get run over or however you want to say it. So I think helping faculty understand that they still do have agency around how they use it and what they do with it can go a long way toward whether they feel burned out or not. As an example, I have a son who, when he works on academic things, becomes burned out within minutes, right? but can get on Minecraft and be on Minecraft for 10, 12 hours, redstoning, building very technical contraptions and machinery and things that are fully automated in the game. It doesn't feel burnt out at all. But it's because he has that sense of agency. He's doing what he wants to do. He's doing what he enjoys. And so making sure that faculty feel like they have that choice, I think, will really be key to them not feeling burnt out about their technology.
Yeah, yeah. So move away from that ultimatum, like you said, do this or be left behind, right? This threat. So then how do we ease in? What's like a small practical way that an instructor who's hesitant to use AI can just kind of dip their toe in?
I'd say the easiest way to do that is just set aside a day, and on that day, anytime you would go to Google to do a search, just go to AI and ask AI instead. Yeah, search is something that we all do. We're all really comfortable doing it. In its simplest use cases, AI is kind of a replacement for search. AI isn't going to link you off to web pages where you might be able to find answers. It's going to try to just synthesize an answer directly for you. But in terms of, I've never done anything before, I don't know how to write a prompt, I've heard that's really complicated, just instead of searching using Google, just spend a day going to Copilot, going to ChatGPT, and type in whatever you're searching for there, and just practice typing some things in the box and getting some answers back. And there's only one way to gain familiarity, right? So that's to do it.
Okay, great, great. What do you see as the role of instructional designers as AI develops in higher ed? I have a special interest in this question.
I do as well. Just a year or two ago, I was president of the International Association of Instructional Designers, so this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart too. I think the role of instructional designers certainly changes. In the past, well, you know this, we spend a lot of our time as instructional designers trying to elicit information from subject matter experts, which typically are faculty, and we have a lot of things that we want them to tell us, and we hope that they'll tell us in certain ways, the ways that we ask them to communicate with us, whether that's in spreadsheets or documents or however it is we're trying to get that information from them. And the number one cause of projects being delayed is always that your SME is late getting things back to you that you wished you had from them on time. So I think the practice and experience that instructional designers have, trying to be really explicit about what we want, elicit the information that we need in the format that we need. I think that experience translates very well into prompting AI models. And I think the idea that we can use AI to generate the first drafts of the products that we're creating, and then pull in a subject matter expert in a review, in an editorial, peer review or quality assurance kind of role. I think for the next 2 or 3 years, instructional design looks a lot like that. And so instructional designers have to be comfortable working with the AI, but they still have to work with the human. And instructional designers are also always project managers, so now there's another piece of the project that you have to figure out how to manage effectively. But I think in the short term, I think that's what it looks like for us.
Yeah, certainly what I'm finding. AI is helping me a lot with the project management. And along the lines of what you were saying there, Ethan Mollick out of Wharton has been talking a lot about how what he's seeing is that educators are often the best at prompting. We might be resistant to it at first, but then once you get into it, it turns out that we're actually pretty gifted at prompting.
We're pretty good at, we write instructions for students all the time. Right? Do this assignment, do it exactly this way, do it in this format, turn it in by this time. Like, we do a lot of instruction writing. And if you've ever been fortunate enough to have a teaching assistant, then before you can turn them loose doing anything, there's a lot of instruction around, this is how I want this done, and I want it done like this. And really prompting is just giving instructions on how you want things done. So as people who write assessments, who maybe mentor graduate students or work with teaching assistants if you teach larger sections. Those skills all translate pretty nicely over into prompting models.
Yeah, or backward planning. Then it helps with, chain thinking as you're prompting. Yeah. All right, thank you. So another thing that I'm doing is a lot of, and I'm sure you are, is looking to other institutions to see what are some promising AI developments that we're seeing at some other institutions.
Yeah, I think right now it's still so early. I don't think there's a killer use case that you can point out right now and say that's exactly what we should all be doing. But back, oh gosh, how long now? 30 or 40 years ago, at Carnegie Mellon University, the university just made a strategic decision to say, what if there were just computers everywhere and compute was available to everyone? It was just ubiquitous everywhere around campus. Everyone had access to compute all the time. And they made a big investment in that. And it's turned out pretty well for them in terms of the technical work that gets done there and the kind of innovation that comes out of Carnegie Mellon. Other universities, maybe a decade later than that, started saying, oh, we all need learning management systems. Everyone needs an LMS. And every course needs to have a shell automatically created and associated with it, and every student needs to be automatically enrolled in all the LMS shells associated with it. There's this idea of kind of technology as infrastructure, right? That it needs to be broadly deployed, broadly available. In the case of the LMS, you might even be required to go log into it to check your grades or do things like that. I think places like Arizona State, as well as Marshall, and some other institutions where there's a very public commitment to saying, we're providing access to a large language model to every student, every faculty member, every administrator. Just getting that ubiquity of access dealt with first, I think is so important. And there's so many schools that haven't done it yet. But I think that very soon, in the next 3 years, you'll see, in the same way that every school has an official LMS that's supported centrally, paid for centrally, managed centrally, every institution will have a relationship with some AI provider, whether it's Anthropic or OpenAI or Microsoft or someone, where they will have licensed campus-wide for everyone to use those kinds of tools. And I think that you have to put the tools in people's hands so that they can play with them, so that they can figure out how they're going to use them. You can't figure out how to effectively use what you can't get your hands on and play with.
Yeah. Carnegie Mellon is the one that I've got my eye on as well. I'm very interested in what they've been doing with their writing program. They're actually using something called, I think they're referring to it as restrained AI.
Okay.
And so they're taking the cognitive load off of students for the grammar and mechanics level writing. They're having them feed all of their critical thinking into it to see how they can use it, almost like we do peer review. So they're learning to use it in an iterative way. And so I'm fascinated by that that's coming out of a writing program because, I come from English and we tend to be a little more anxious about the AI.
Yes.
So yeah, I've got my eye on them too. They're doing
There's a long history of doing some really great computational writing work there. For many years.
Yeah. Well, this brings me to my next question. Student use. Like, we do need to get our hands on this, right? Can you share some examples of how students are using AI in beneficial and maybe surprising ways?
Yeah. It's so, these language models are so capable. And I don't mean that they always get everything right. But I mean, you can do anything with a language model that involves language. And if your mental model for working with AI is Google, then you'll ask it certain kinds of questions and you'll get responses back. And that's essentially all you'll use it for, is information retrieval. But students keep figuring out other things that involve words, like conversations, for example. So actually the first time I heard of anyone doing a mock job interview using generative AI was a student telling me, I've got this job interview coming up, I wanted to practice for it. So I just told ChatGPT, pretend you're the hiring manager at this company and you're interviewing someone for this role. Ask me 10 technical questions and ask me 10 of these other questions, and then when we're done, give me feedback. And so any kind of conversation that's important to you, that is high stakes, that you'd like to practice, but normally you wouldn't be able to figure out, who can I get to sit down and have a mock interview with me that'll ask reasonable questions and give me kind of honest feedback? The language model is great for that. And so as you think about other kinds of high stakes conversations, like maybe with an employee who isn't performing the way that they need to be, that you manage, you need to have a performance related conversation with them, you can practice that with the language model. So any kind of conversation, turns out language models are really good at conversation. So, and I think we'll see more domains like that kind of open up, where people figure out, oh, you know what, doing this task actually involves talking about the task. I could do that with the language model. And so I've been delightfully surprised at the kinds of conversations that they've had there, or also creating interactive case studies for themselves. I need to practice this scenario. Maybe I'm an instructional designer. I'm working with this faculty member. They haven't got me everything that I needed yet by the date that I needed it by. Please role play this conversation with me. Give me some practice. Tell me where I've put my foot in my mouth. And make those mistakes with the model instead of making them with the human being. So lots of opportunities like that.
And lots of opportunities then for authentic assessment that we can
create.
Very
much so. Yeah.
Okay. Great examples. Okay. Well, this brings me around to probably my most complicated question. So there's a little setup to this. We see that faculty participation in AI training is mostly centered around ethics and prompting. This is according to Time for Class. You're a consultant for Marshall's Intro to AI and Ethics, AI Micro-Credentials. And Lumen has a fellowship in evidence-based teaching with Gen AI. Can you talk about your approach to AI professional development and give some examples?
Sure. So when you say professional development, to me that takes it out of the realm of just training, and now we're talking about training people who are going to be teaching. And so I think there's lots to say about ethics and AI. There are lots of people saying those things. It's not very hard to find if you're paying attention on Twitter or LinkedIn or anywhere else. It seems like there's lots of writing happening about the ethics of AI. What I don't see happening a lot is, you mentioned Lumen's professional development around evidence-based teaching and generative AI, is it's one thing to have kind of a context-free conversation about ethics or about prompting, but it's another if you're starting from the point of, I'm an instructor, I'm trying to help students learn, I've got a bunch of tools in my belt technologically that I might pull out the learning management system for this, or pull out Quizlet for that, or pull out, I pull out different tools when I have different needs. At what point does it make sense to pull out AI? Like what is the instructional use case when AI is going to be the most effective tool that I can pull out of my belt? So I think starting from that position of not let's talk about AI because it's cool and everybody's talking about it and you should know about it. Why? Why should I care? I love I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but the original Karate Kid movie. There's a sequence in which Daniel is painting this fence, just painting it, and has no idea why. And he's sanding the floor, and then he's waxing cars, and finally he just turns around and takes a swing at Mr. Miyagi because he's so frustrated. He's doing all this work, but he doesn't understand why. Why should he care? Why should he be investing all this effort? Right. So I think helping faculty see, when I use these tools, I can really improve student learning if I use them in these ways. What are those ways? Those ways are evidence-based teaching practices that we've known about for a very long time. How can I enact those practices more easily, more quickly, with less effort, with less variability, with more reliability, using generative AI? And then, of course, there's how can I be more productive personally? How can I save time for myself using generative AI? Can I have it help me draft a syllabus? Can I have it help me draft papers that I'm reading if I feed into it the rubric and tell it the way that I want it to approach that? So I think it really becomes important to ground the professional development in circumstances that are going to make people care about the work that they're doing, because otherwise When you don't care, you just don't make a lot of effort. We see that sometimes from students in class. If they don't care about the class, they don't make all the effort that we wish they would. And students or people in faculty or people to faculty behave just the same way.
Yeah, yeah. So don't give them busy work.
Yes.
Make sure it's contextualized.
Yes.
The thing that it always has been when a new tool comes out,
Mm-hmm.
don't use it just for the sake of using it, but make
Right.
sure that it fits in context. Yeah, great advice. Okay, so this is kind of related. In your opinion, what are the most critical yet often overlooked aspects of faculty development in the context of AI? What do you believe is missing in our current training?
Mm-hmm. I would say it's that connection. And I would say that's also true for our training with the learning management system. It's true for our training with any kind of training that we provide to faculty. A lot of time that training is, here's how you log in. Here are the 5 most important features. You click here, you click there. And it's very mechanical, and it's kind of, how do I become a fluent user of the tool? But there's never any discussion of the reason that I'm using the tool. Or there is frequently no discussion of the reason that we're using the tool. So having this grounding in, and it can be either of those two things. We can talk about it from a productivity perspective. You as a faculty member, maybe the title of the PD is Come Learn How to Save Hours Every Week Using Generative AI. Like, people would come to that. They would pay attention in a different way than come learn about prompting or something like that, right? And the same thing, I think people would be more excited about that than they would about learn how to enact evidence-based teaching practices using generative AI. But I really think you mentioned in instructional design, we take this backward design approach, that we start with the goals of what we want students to be able to do, and we build up from there. I think professional development's the same way. What is it that we want instructors and faculty to be able to come out of that doing? Do they themselves value being able to do that thing? And then how do we make it really obvious to them that they already value this thing? We want to help them do it better, faster, whatever. It's just making that connection that is missing, I think.
Outcomes oriented. This is the goal for this particular workshop.
Relevance, interest, engagement.
Yeah. Okay, great. So my next question kind of brings these things together then. Can you describe a project to us where you have successfully integrated AI, especially to enhance educational equity, because that is something that you work on?
That is something that I work on. In a class that I taught last spring, last fall, it's all dog years now. In a course that I taught recently, it was a class on generative AI, and we covered some pretty technical topics, and most of the students in the class were non-technical. And some of them, depending on where they were, would have access to a roommate or a friend or someone else who was technical who could kind of coach them along through the more technical parts. And some of them did not have access to a parent, a sibling, someone with that kind of expertise. And so in order to kind of equalize that, I did use AI in a way. Basically, I created an assignment in it's a flipped classroom sort of model where I have them doing a lot of reading, video watching, kind of preparing outside of class. And then during class time, we were actively engaged in doing things as opposed to me lecturing during class. But I needed them to be ready when they got to class. I needed them to be prepared. So basically, I created, at the end of the reading and the video watching, the preparatory material, an interactive review using AI. So I just had a prompt that they copied, and then they went to AI and they pasted it in, and the AI basically woke up and said, hey, let's talk about neural networks. Tell me what you understand. What are weights and biases in a neural network? Open-ended question, right? Not multiple choice. The student could kind of type out their answer, and then the AI could give them some feedback saying, well, that was correct, but it sounds like you might have misunderstood this part. Let me explain it to you a little better. And then it would always ask, would you like to know a little more about this? Do you have any other questions about this topic before we move on to the next one? And that class, we had a Friday meeting, and so every Thursday night by midnight, students had to have had that conversation with their kind of AI study buddy and then copy and paste the text of it into an assignment, which they posted in the LMS. And that was actually the only assignment I required from them in terms of all of their preparation, because I could see the traces in that conversation of what they didn't understand and what they asked more questions about. And then that made it so that in class time, if there was something that everyone had misunderstood and had gone deeper with the AI with, then we could talk about that as a group a little bit before we got into the activity.
Mm-hmm.
But I use that as a way to equalize access to that kind of smarter friend that I knew some of them would have and some of them would not have, so that they all had they all had the opportunity to ask more questions, to follow up, to dig deeper, and really be at an equivalent place by the time they came into class.
Yeah, great. Very cool. All right, last question, looking toward the future.
Okay.
How do you envision the landscape of higher education evolving over the next decade with the integration of AI, and what transformative possibilities are you most excited about?
Yeah, there is no way to know. There's no way to know where it's going in 10 years. I'd say 3 to 5 is really dangerous, a real stretch. I think some of the things that are most exciting to me are using AI as a way to, well, like I was just describing, to answer questions, to dig deeper, to let me explore things that I'm curious about. I think AI as a generator of course content is very interesting. I've been, personally, I've been exploring the idea of writing textbooks that, instead of looking like a textbook that has headers and sections and 10 or 20 pages within a chapter, what if the person who was writing the textbook was really writing an outline and a prompt, and then you as a student, when you were ready to interact with that chapter and go study that chapter, you'd cut and paste that prompt in, and it would start generating information for you then, which would give you an opportunity to steer it a little bit. So maybe I'd be really interested in examples in an economics class. Maybe I want supply and demand explained to me in terms of tickets to a Jacob Collier concert, but maybe you would prefer Taylor Swift or Beyonce or whoever it might be. Right? But the idea that as those principles are being explained, as the explanations are being created, you could say, I'm interested in these 5 or 6 things. And when you explain things to me, try to use those examples if that's possible. That's a very surface level kind of example. But you can see that when the explanations and the review questions and the feedback, when those are all being created in real time in response to you and your current state of understanding, that's a very different experience than reading something that was written. And let's just be honest, the prose in textbooks is not famous for being really engaging, right? It's written in a way to kind of ensure that it will offend no one, and in doing so, it also interests no one. And it's a lot of facts, and they're organized very clearly, and that's great, but it's very encyclopedic, typically. So to be able to have a learning experience that is just a little more responsive to you and the things you care about and what you do and don't understand and what you are and aren't interested in, I think is very exciting and a very, very promising direction to head.
Yeah, and surprisingly, something that can help us to personalize the learning experience.
Yeah. Where assessment goes is still a very open question. I think there's lots of, I have so many ideas just colliding in my brain. There's so much worry about assessment. There's so much excitement about what assessment could be. Like, could we do automatically graded assessments that are open-ended now instead of having to rely on multiple choice all the time if we want to automatically grade them? Then you get into cheating and academic dishonesty. Then you have questions about what is it that we actually want students to be able to do?
Yeah.
Do they need to memorize their multiplication facts up through 1,000 times 1,000, or at some point is it okay to use a calculator to figure out what 493 times 687 is as you're trying to get work done out in the world. So the role of tool use and where it is and isn't appropriate, and just so many interesting conversations ahead of us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, those assessment questions are very big ones because they speak to larger questions that we have about the role of the institution and
Yeah.
employable skills and all of that. Yes.
Why
big,
are we
big
even
questions.
engaging in this enterprise?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
A very
Well,
existential feeling.
perhaps we should go ask AI right now.
I'm terrified, actually. That would be amazing. We should do that.
Yes, let's go. Thank you so much for meeting with us today.
Thanks for
It's
having
been
me.
a
This is
pleasure.
super fun. I appreciate it.
All right.